I'm Samantha Foster, and this is Venus Mastermind, a space for honest reflection, pattern breaking, and sovereign thinking. I'm not here to perform or to teach in a formal way. This is a shared reflection, a place to think out loud, to name what's been living in me, and to speak honestly about what I'm seeing and integrating. There's no agenda here beyond truth and presence. If something here resonates, take what's yours and leave the rest. Welcome back. If you've been with me through this entire series, through morals, values, ethics, the bonus episode, principles, standards, boundaries, integrity, and intuition, I want to start by just acknowledging what that actually is. That's 9 episodes of sitting with yourself honestly, of looking at the invisible architecture underneath your choices, your relationships, and your sense of who you are. That's not a small thing. And now we're here, the final episode of the internal ecosystem, wisdom. And I've been sitting with how to open this one for a while, because wisdom isn't a concept you can really explain, not in the way we've been able to explain the other layers. Morals are judgment systems, values are behavioral priorities, ethics govern responsibility, principles describe how reality operates, standards determine what you stay available for, boundaries are the action that expresses your standards, integrity is the whole system lived in real time. Intuition is the felt signal of a calibrated self. Wisdom is what happens after all of that. And that's harder to put into words. So I'm not going to try to define it the way I did with everything else. Instead, I want to just sit with it. Let it unfold the way it actually does in real life, not as a framework, but as an arrival. Before I say what wisdom is, I need to say what it isn't, because we tend to confuse it with a lot of things. Wisdom isn't intelligence. I know incredibly smart people who have lived the same painful loop for decades without anything changing. They can analyze the loop with precision. They understand it theoretically, but understanding something and being genuinely free of it are two completely different experiences. Wisdom isn't knowledge either. You can have read every book, taken every course, collected every certificate, and still make choices from a place of unexamined fear. Knowledge is information. Wisdom is what happens when information has actually been metabolized by living. And wisdom isn't the same as age. I've met 70-year-olds who were still acting out of wounds they hadn't looked at, and 25-year-olds who had a quality of steadiness that you couldn't fake. Time doesn't create wisdom. Experience does. But only when that experience has been genuinely received, not suppressed, not bypassed, not repackaged into a success story before it had a chance to actually land. And this is the one I want to stay with for a moment, because I think this is where most of us quietly miss wisdom, even when the raw material for it is right there in front of us. We don't receive our experiences. We survive them. We move through them. We come out the other side and immediately look for what we can do with what we just went through. What lesson we can extract, what content we can create, what insight we can share, what meaning we can make that will make the pain feel worth something. And I'm not saying that's wrong. Making meaning is human. It's one of the things that make us remarkable. But wisdom requires something more than meaning making. It requires actually letting what happened change you. Because here's the distinction I've had to earn. Not all lived experience becomes wisdom. Lived experience is what you've been through, what you can talk about, what you can explain. Embodied wisdom is something different. It's what no longer has a charge, what you're no longer trying to resolve or prove or extract something from. The marker is almost quiet. You realize at some point that you no longer have anything to learn from it. Not because nothing happened, but because it finished happening inside of you. And there's one more thing wisdom isn't. And this one I want to name specifically, because it's probably the version we've been shown the most. Wisdom isn't the peace that comes from removing yourself from the conditions that test you. There's a version of wisdom we've been handed through spiritual traditions, through gurus, through the kind of teaching that says, let go of attachment, transcend the ego. Nothing really matters. We are all one. And I'm not saying that's false. As a perspective, as an awareness of something larger than the individual, there's something real in it. I've sat with those ideas. I found truth in them. But here's the question I keep coming back to. Has that wisdom ever had to hold anything? Because it's a very different thing to embody stillness in a temple where your meals are provided, your environment is controlled, and you have no children to worry about, no debt, no survival pressure, and to embody that same stillness in the middle of real life, in a job you don't fully control, in a body that's been through something, in a month where you don't know how the bills are getting paid, in a relationship that is actively costing you something, in a family system that was broken before you arrived. I've always thought about it this way. If you're going to be Buddha walking through fire. Don't tell me about non-attachment from a place of perfect safety. Show me what that looks like when the ground is actually burning. Because that's where it either holds or it doesn't. So there's a difference between what I'd call detached wisdom, the kind that's assessed by stepping outside of the system, outside of pressure, outside of consequence, and what I call embedded wisdom, wisdom that was built inside real conditions, inside responsibility, inside the weight of actually having something at stake. Detached wisdom says, I'm not affected by the world. Embedded wisdom says, I am fully in the world and I'm still not ruled by it. Those look similar from the outside. They are not the same. One avoids friction, the other was shaped by it. And only one of them can actually help someone who is still inside the fire. And there's something else that took me a long time to actually sit with. Wisdom isn't a personality trait. It's not something you either have or don't have across the board. It's domain specific. It lives in the particular areas of life where you've actually done the full journey, not just survived something, but metabolized it, integrated it, come out the other side genuinely changed by it. Someone can have deep wisdom in parenting and still be navigating money from a place of old fear. Someone can have real wisdom about how people work, how teams function, how to lead others, and still be in the early chapters of understanding themselves. Neither of those is a failure. It's just honest. I'll give you an example, and this is personal, so bear with me. I spent many years in the corporate world, and even now, having stepped away from that life entirely, I would not say that I have wisdom of the corporate world. I have lived experience, a lot of it, hard-earned experience, but not embodied wisdom. And the difference is this: I wasn't able to successfully maneuver all of it. There are parts of that world where I still carry the weight of what didn't work, what I didn't get to finish, what ended before I felt complete with it. This isn't wisdom. That's still experience in process. But I do have embodied wisdom in healing from trauma, childhood trauma specifically. I lived that path so fully, through the survival, through the shadow work, through the long and non-linear process of learning to be safe enough in my own body to actually heal, that I can hold space for someone else on that path without needing anything from it. That's the difference. When I'm with someone in the middle of that journey, there's no charge in me, no unfinished business pulling me in any direction, just presence. And what I've come to understand about that particular kind of healing is that there's a sequence that can't be skipped. First, you have to be safe. Then you could do the shadow work, actually looking at the parts of yourself that were shaped in the dark. And only after that, only once there's enough of a foundation underneath you, can you do the body work, the integration, the releasing of what the nervous system has been holding for years, sometimes decades. And I want to name something that doesn't get said enough about that sequence. You cannot think your way into safety. You cannot meditate your way out of survival mode. Meditation is often presented as the entry point, the place you start, but that's a misunderstanding of what survival mode actually does to a nervous system. When someone is genuinely in survival mode, running from creditors, not knowing how the rent gets paid, living inside family systems that are still actively harmful, carrying the weight of obligations that never should have been theirs, their system is not available for reflection. It's scanning, it's managing, it's doing what it was designed to do under threat. Keep going. And a lot of what gets labeled as resistance to growth or lack of self-awareness or even unwillingness to do the work is actually just people in survival mode who don't have access yet to the conditions that growth requires. That's not a character flaw. That's a resource issue. Stillness is a luxury of safety, not in a shameful way, just in an honest one. You don't find your way into peace through effort alone. You find your way into peace when enough of the threat has lifted that your system can finally exhale. And that exhale is where everything else begins. And I want to say something about that because I think it matters. Our bodies don't become new. Healing isn't erasure. There will be cracks. There will be scars. You may not see them from the outside, but they're there. And coming out the other side of that process with the cracks and the scars still present and being at peace with that, that's part of what wisdom actually looks like. Not the absence of evidence that something hard happened, the presence of something whole that includes it. So what is wisdom actually? In the way I've come to understand it, through my own experience, through watching what happens in the people I work with, through the places where I've gotten it right and the places where I've gotten it completely wrong, wisdom is what accumulates in you when you've been honest with yourself long enough. It's not a thing you acquire. It's a state you arrive at. And the difference is important because if wisdom is something you acquire, then it becomes another thing on the list, another layer to build, another standard to meet, and it becomes performative. You start looking for wisdom the way you look for a credential, rather than just continuing to live with honesty and letting what happens happen to you. Wisdom is what happens when the internal ecosystem isn't just something you consult, it's something you are. When your morals are so integrated that you no longer have to stop and think about what feels wrong, you just feel it. When your values are so embodied that the choices that honor them are the ones that feel most natural, not the ones that require the most willpower. When your ethical sense of responsibility to others isn't a framework you apply, it's just how you move in the world. When the principles you've extracted from your own life experience function like a quiet compass, not a rule book. When your standards don't require negotiation every time they're tested, because the participation criteria you live by have become reflex. When your boundaries don't need to be performed or enforced with intensity, because the clarity that produces them is so settled that there's nothing to prove. When integrity is no longer something you work toward, but something you embody quietly without announcement. When your intuition has been so educated by everything you've lived through that you trust that. When your intuition has been so educated by everything you lived through that you trust that felt sense before the mental analysis. That's wisdom, not the destination, the integration. Here's what I've noticed about the people I respect most. Not the ones who have had the easiest lives, not the ones who have been spared the hard things, the ones who have been genuinely through it and have something to show for it that isn't a polished narrative, something quieter, something more real. There's a particular quality in someone who has actually metabolized their pain, who hasn't bypassed it or used it as content or performed their growth at you, who just absorbed it, changed because of it, became more themselves, not less. And there's something I want to say about this that I haven't heard said enough. The hard seasons weren't the interruption of your story. They were the story. The ones that compressed everything you've ever learned about yourself into something usable. The ones that stripped away the performance and left only what was actually real. I know that's easier to say from the other side of a hard season than in the middle of one. And I'm not trying to romanticize difficulty or suggest that suffering is required for wisdom. I'm saying something more specific than that. I'm saying that the experiences we most want to move away from as quickly as possible, the failures, the relationships that ended, the moments of real reckoning with who we are and what we've been doing, those are often the ones that hold the most potential for genuine transformation. But only if we let them land. Only if we resist the urge to immediately metabolize them into a lesson and instead let them sit with us long enough to actually change something. Wisdom is patient in a way that our culture isn't. It doesn't arrive on a timeline. It doesn't announce itself, and it can't be forced, but it comes, and when it does, you know, not because of what you suddenly understand, but because of how differently you respond to the same situations that used to derail you. I've thought a lot about what the markers of real wisdom are, not the ones we talk about publicly. The composed response, the measured language, the gentle redirection, those can all be performed. The ones that can't. When wisdom is genuinely operating in a particular area of your life, There's a stillness there. A patience that doesn't feel like restraint. It just is. A peace with the thing that isn't the same as having resolved it or fixed it or gotten what you wanted from it. It's more like the charge is gone. There's nothing left to defend, nothing left to prove, nothing left to project onto someone else, nothing left to project onto someone else's similar struggle. And that part is important, because when something is truly integrated, you can hold space for someone else inside of it without any of your own story getting activated. You can sit with someone in the middle of the thing you've been through and feel nothing but presence. That's not numbness. That's wisdom. You can be in a difficult situation without immediately reaching for a tool or a technique to manage it. You can sit with discomfort without having to explain it away or resolve it on a timeline. You can stop expecting life to feel fair in the way that childhood taught you it should be. You stop needing the hard things that happen to you to have been wrong in order for your life to be okay. The last one is the one I've had to earn the most slowly. The idea that something can have been genuinely painful, genuinely unjust, genuinely not what I would have chosen, and also have been exactly what shaped the parts of me I most value. Both things at the same time. Wisdom holds contradiction without collapsing, without needing to resolve it into one clean narrative. And this is different from resignation, different from giving up on things being better. Wisdom is actually one of the most actionable states I know. When you're genuinely operating from it, your choices get cleaner. Your decisions are less reactive. Your relationship with your own authority becomes less effortful. Not because you have all the answers, but because you've developed a deep and tested relationship with the process of finding them. You stop asking, why does this keep happening to me? And you start asking, what does this require of me now? That shift is wisdom in action. So, if that's what wisdom feels like on the inside, that stillness, the absence of charge, that ability to hold someone else's story without your own getting activated, what does it actually look like in a life? Because I think this is where it gets practical. And I think it's also where we get the most confused. Wisdom in a life doesn't look like escape. It doesn't look like opting out of all systems and structures, all obligations. Most of us live inside real constraints, financial pressure, family responsibility, communities, histories we didn't choose. Wisdom doesn't ask you to blow all of that up and start over from nothing. That's not what this is. What it looks like is this. You stop giving yourself where it costs you, one small decision at a time. There's a moment that comes, and it comes quietly, which is why most people miss it, where you realize that a lot of the obligations you've been carrying were never actually yours. The loyalty you've been performing to family systems that harm you. The access you've been given to people who have shown you repeatedly that they can't hold it with care. The version of yourself you've been maintaining because someone else needed you to be that. None of it was ever a debt you owed. It was a story you absorbed early, before you had the language to question it. And here's what embodied wisdom makes possible. You can love someone and not give them access to you. Those two things can coexist. Love doesn't require unlimited availability. Care doesn't require self-erasure. And the clarity to hold that without guilt, without explanation, without needing the other person to agree, that's wisdom in action. But it doesn't happen all at once. That's the part I want to be honest about. Wisdom doesn't show up as one large, decisive moment where everything changes. It shows up as 100 small moments where you don't abandon yourself, where you don't say yes when everything in you is saying no, where you don't shrink to make someone comfortable, where you make a different choice than the one the old pattern would have made, and you do it quietly, without announcement, without needing anyone to witness it. Those choices compound over time. They become a life that looks completely different from the one you were handed. Not because you escaped anything, because you stopped participating in the parts that cost you yourself. That's the difference between understanding wisdom and living it. Living it is just one more small choice from what you know toward what you're building. There's one more thing I want to sit with before we close the series, and it's about your story. Not the version you tell at dinner parties or write in your bio. The actual one, the full one, with the parts that don't make you look good and the parts that still don't fully make sense, and the parts that you had to live with the ambiguity of for years. Wisdom changes your relationship with that story. When I look back at my own life, at the choices I made when I didn't know better, at the seasons that nearly broke me, at the versions of myself I've had to quietly retire, something has shifted in how I hold all of it. Not because the facts have changed, but because I've actually received what those experiences had to give me. And what I've come to understand is this: you don't become wise in spite of what you've lived through. You become wise because of it, the whole of it, even the parts that felt like they were undoing you, especially those. Because those are the ones that took away every performance, every script, everything you were relying on that wasn't actually you. And what remained? What had to remain, because it was the only thing left, was something true, something essential, something that, once you stopped running from it, turned out to be enough, more than enough. Your story isn't the thing you have to recover from. It's the thing that made you someone worth listening to, including by yourself. And so we come to the end of the internal ecosystem. What we started together, looking at morals, understanding what values actually do under pressure, sitting with the responsibility that comes with power, naming the principles that reality has taught us, getting honest about what we truly participate in, defining what we do when something isn't working, discovering what integrity actually requires of us in real time, learning to trust the signal underneath all the noise, and now arriving here, at the place where all of that stops being a practice and becomes a way of being. This is what sovereignty actually looks like on the inside. Not a position you hold, not a performance you sustain, a quality of relationship with yourself that nothing external can take away, because it was built from the inside out, from honesty, from willingness, from having the courage to keep looking, even when what you found was uncomfortable. You've been doing that. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not all the way through every episode, but you've been doing it, and that matters more than you might realize right now. And here's what I want to leave you with as we close this series. Wisdom doesn't ask you to save anyone. It doesn't push, it doesn't correct, it doesn't hurry people along or try to spare them the path they need to walk. That's not what embodied wisdom does. Embodied wisdom is a lighthouse. It stands steady, it holds clarity, and it lets others find their way. Not because you've given them the right path, but because your presence itself becomes the kind of light that makes it a little easier to see. That's the difference between needing to use your wisdom and simply being someone who has it. Transformation isn't becoming someone new. It's stopping the performance of someone you're not. That's what this whole series was always pointing toward. And if anything in these 10 episodes has helped you see yourself a little more clearly, hold yourself a little more honestly, trust yourself a little more accurately, then we did what we came here to do. Thank you for being here for all of it. I mean that. And if you're wondering what comes next, there is a next. Because here's the thing about the internal ecosystem. It gave us the architecture, the foundation, the invisible framework that was already shaping every choice, every relationship, every moment of misalignment or clarity we've ever experienced. And now that we can see it clearly, honestly, without the fog of what we were never taught to examine, the next question becomes obvious. Not what's wrong with me, not why does this keep happening, but now that I see it, how do I actually lead myself within it? That's where we're going next, the self-led path. And if you've heard what I shared earlier in this episode about the sequence of healing, about safety coming before shadow work, the shadow work coming before body integration, that's not just a personal story. That's the map we're going to walk together. The self-led path moves through self-empowerment first, rebuilding the relationship with yourself from the inside out. Then shadow work, the parts that were shaped in the dark, the ones that have been running quietly underneath everything. Then body integration, because the nervous system holds what the mind has processed, and real healing eventually has to include what the body is still carrying. And then archetypes, the deeper symbolic language of who you are at your core, the patterns and energies that have always been moving through your story, whether you named them or not. It's not a program, it's a path. And like all real paths, it has a sequence for a reason. We start on May 18th. I'll see you there. I'm going to pause here and let this land. If something in this resonated, you don't need to do anything with it. Just sit with it and notice what continues to unfold. Thank you for listening and for being here with me.